Amendment proposed, clause 136, page 78, line 11, at the end, insert the words as printed on the Marshall list.
I'd like to thank the Noble Lord Earl Howe for moving those amendments so well and explaining some of the concerns. I'm particularly pleased that he brought back the point about artistic freedom and so on, because I thought that was very well made. But anyway, I'm going to talk more broadly about the amendments in this group, because I do think that they sum up the dangers of mission creep inherent in the bill, but also highlight the pitfalls in allowing the Secretary of State to have such leeway away from democratic scrutiny to change the goalposts, granting ministers the power to extend smoke-free areas, including outdoors, to include vaping and indeed heating tobacco use, is actually something that should not just be nodded through. And it would mean that the use of the power of secondary legislation to allow the banning of, for example, smoking or vaping outside in a beer garden, in a pub, to ring fence off whole swathes of outdoor uncovered spaces, such as outside health and social care facilities or education settings. And it is worth remembering that that would mean that frontline workers, from teachers to care workers, never mind patients or residents, it could be illegal for them to go and have a vape outside their workplace. And we have to ask, is that reasonable? Is that proportionate? It's one thing if the workplace designates that they shouldn't, but for the law to intervene, I think is more dangerous. Yet once more, this effectively conflates smoking with vaping, undermining the perception that vaping is relatively safer, as I've endlessly, boringly repeated. But also, I did want to just say something about smokers, because in this relentless bid to banish smoking, there is a danger that we end up demonising smokers. That's millions of our citizens who can be punished for indulging in a risky but legal habit, and kind of saying we don't want to see them anywhere in the public sphere. I don't know if that's the kind of society that the government have in mind, because even Cancer Research UK warns that, quote, it will be important to consider how to avoid stigma or accidentally risk pushing people into smoking in their home, which would increase second-hand smoke exposure to those living with them. So again, those unintended consequences. As part of the justification for many of these kind of outdoor bans is this notion of modelling and normalisation theories so popular in academia, that says that we need to protect children, but we do the protecting of children so that they never see adults smoking or vaping, so that they don't copy adults, that it's never normalised. And I just want us to think about what that would mean if we go along, that that's the reason why we can't ever have adults vaping outside where children might see them. But if we're actually saying that children might copy adults who vape or smoke, isn't that a green light for the state to start seizing children from their parents and leading public health home invasions to reduce children from, to rescue children from their vaping parents? I'm frightened to say that because it might give the Minister some ideas, but the amendments in this group that I put my name to, largely in the name of the Noble Lord Udney Lister, again, because he put in some brilliant amendments, it seems to me are entirely proportionate and sensible, and they help keep the bill on track and to focus on its own stated aims, instead of being a vehicle for outlandish overreach that's not evidence-based. Because the arguments in favour of restricting vaping and smoking outside venues seems to hinge as much on a sort of prohibitionist personal distaste for the habit, rather than any sense of evidence-based policy. And that's why I think that the issue around passive vaping and the lack of evidence in relation to it is worth highlighting here, because, again, Cancer Research UK, and I stress this because Cancer Research UK support this bill, but keep putting out warnings in their briefings that you have to be careful you don't go too far. And they say it is sensible to note that while further research is needed to understand the health effects of vaping, they do say that, but then they say, however, quote, there is currently no good evidence that second-hand vapor is harmful. And given that evidence indicates that vaping is far less harmful than smoking, it's likely that second-hand vapor is far less harmful than second-hand smoke. Meanwhile, Dr. Sarah Jackson, Principal Research Fellow at UCL's Tobacco and Alcohol Research Group, explains, quote, second-hand exposure also differs. Smoke comes both from the burning tip of the cigarette and exhaled smoke, whereas e-cigarettes release aerosol only when exhaled, resulting in far lower bystander exposure. And other research from UCL has found that people exposed to second-hand vapor absorb around 84% less nicotine than those exposed to second-hand smoke, and while not zero, exposure from vaping, they say, is far lower than from smoking, and the level of other toxicants is even lower. So they're basically saying, hold on, keep a sense of proportion, and that's all that we're talking about here. So I'm hoping that the government will seek out such voices in its smoke-free, heated tobacco-free, vape-free places in England consultation, which was announced on the first day of recess on Friday the 13th of February. Of course, these free places will be anything but free, as they'll deny individuals' personal freedoms and also impinge on the freedoms of a great many venues, both private and public. On the one hand, then, I would urge the noble lady, the Minister, and her department to widely and loudly advertise that consultation so that as diverse a group of respondents can be encouraged to feed in beyond the usual suspects, NGOs and lobbyists. I especially hope she will encourage the hospitality industry and individual venues to respond, because as we've already heard, the British Institute, the hospitality industry are under the cosh. The British Institute of Innkeeping has warned that 62% of their members fear that these kind of bans will negatively impact their trade, and 20% believe it would lead to the closure of their pubs. Now, sometimes when we discuss issues in this bill, we view all aspects of society only through the prism of public health. It can be a rather joyless, arid and sanitised version of the good life, in my opinion. For those unfamiliar with the world of pubs, pub gardens or nightclubs or eating or music venues, over-regulation will kill them off, not just in terms of the, they'll kill off the atmosphere, never mind kill off them financially. The truth is, if you look at the research, 49% of regular pub goers are smokers, shock horror, even though smokers only account for less than 15% of the UK population. And more, of course, are vapers. And that is not a crime or a problem. Funnily enough, a lot of people who go to pubs also like to have a drink as well. Yet bizarrely, they are in trouble for that too. Many in hospitality worry that this bill will be used as a blueprint for alcohol as well as anything else, because indeed the Department of Health are considering banning under 18s purchasing no alcohol or alcohol-free drinks in pubs, because they say it would encourage alcohol uptake in the future. And then there's a discussion about adding health warnings and imagery and plain packaging and everything in relation to alcohol bottles. So it's no wonder that all of those different hospitality organisations that the Noble Lord Sharp quoted earlier are actually saying that they're worried about the actual impact of this particular bill and its provisions in relation to trade, customers' behaviour and operating costs. And I mean, to be honest, it's no wonder that many publicans have banned Labour MPs and their locals if you consider everything that's been added on. Right, because to note, hospitality venues at present do presently put up their own restrictions. In other words, they ban people they don't want, they've got rules, and that's because they deal with their clientele with absolute common sense and they have rules and so on. But there's a fear that such proportionate self-regulation by sensible people who run the hospitality industry in this country will be trampled on by this bill. Now finally, sadly, trusting small SMEs in hospitality to act responsibly is not a feature of Amendment 199 in the name of the noble lady Baroness Northover and Baroness Walmsley. And it seems apt in my final speech in this bill to note how shocked I am, shocked I tell you, that the Liberal Democrats benches are neither Liberal nor Democratic on this issue. They want to inveigle, through Amendment 199, local councils into compliance by using this law to only issue future pavement licences as smoke-free. So much for localism, or for encouraging a thriving high street or cafe society, or supporting local autonomy. I mean, I really do think it's a step too far. Well, I think a few things are, but that really is the limit. So I'm hoping the noble lady, the Minister, can reassure me that the government are not as illiberal as the Liberal Democrats. I won't necessarily hold my breath.